Hey fans, welcome back to another episode of the Nailing History podcast. I am your host, Matt, and I am joined finally with the co-host of the show, John N.
Hey guys, I'm stoked to be back. It's been a wild past couple of weeks, but Matt told me, as some of our listeners may have heard last week on the call, he phoned me in, and we weren't getting our money's worth with the old Buzzsprout, so we had to take care of that. And I'm really glad he called me. I was in the middle of cooking dinner, but it was great. It really felt loose, felt good, and I was just happy to kind of talk back to you guys.
Got some good response back from the big solo episode. People said it was pretty good.
I thought it was quite solid.
I enjoyed.
Yeah.
It was actually, I think, timed in to be a This Week in History type thing at first, beginning of August, or end of August, I think, was when Emperor Norton stated that he was the emperor, I think. So we were going to kind of do it in like a This Week in History type thing, but then, time went by, time flew by. We missed our window for that. And, so I just wanted to get it over with, or get it not over with necessarily, but just get it through.
Well, he was quite the character, and I definitely think you had a great chance of sharing that with fans. I think he did really great. I really enjoyed listening to it. It was nice to see that come back on Thursday morning.
I guess one of the reasons that we couldn't get into that is one of the Sundays. I think maybe the Sunday that we were actually planning to do it, I threw a bit of a curveball in the situation, and I actually had time off from work planned. Just had to take a week off, and I wasn't going to do anything in the last minute. I was like, hey, you know what? Why don't I go up? It's the beginning of fall. At this point, it was like the middle to the end of September. I guess it was the middle of September, and beginning of fall, especially up north in the Adirondacks. Figured I'd go up there, maybe see some of the leaves changing, and just get up there. I was up there years before, and I'd always been wanting to go back. So, kind of last minute planned on a trip there. I usually go by myself to trips, but I kind of thought I don't want to really go by myself. Let me see if John could go. With the last minute thing, and he came through and agreed to come up with me. So we went up. We spent 3 days, 2 nights in the Adirondacks. It was pretty nice, a little camping trip.
Yeah, it was a really good time. We ascended the highest peak in the state of New York. It was a big achievement for us. Matt was so kind as to get me a T-shirt to celebrate the fact.
Yeah, Mount Marcy in the Adirondacks. If anybody's interested, it's about a 16.2 mile out and back hike. So it's a little tough, but it was fun. I also have to apologize to the rest of the country. I feel like I made a pretty poor impression on some Brits on the trail. I don't think they really appreciated. We were passing them. This was like we were almost done. I was pretty wiped at the time, and they were this couple was walking. I didn't know they were from England at the time, but I just go up to them. I go, "Sup," and they didn't think it was funny or appreciate it at all. They were like, "Hello," in their English accent, and didn't seem like they were impressed with my Americanisms.
Matt,
I don't think I said "sup." I think I was like, "What's up? Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up?" Something like that, because I was tired and I was just trying to be nice. But then John was like, I don't think you should talk to people like that on the trail. And I was like, okay, sorry for being me.
Nah, just thought you were. Yeah, you got to understand. We weren't in Philly. We were in the Philly area. People were just
Yeah, but they were in our country, and they should have appreciated that. Typical Brits. We had some testy times between the two of us, but that's what happens when you're, spending 24 hours a day together all the way up in the mountains. So we survived. We got through it. We had some pretty fun times. And I guess one of the things, the lead into this episode, on our way back, we decided to stop at a national historic park. Yes, National Historic Park.
National
that
Military
we were
Park. Yep.
Saratoga National Historical Park.
I think it's just Saratoga National Battlefield, something like that.
Yeah. So we stopped in there. I guess I don't know if people are super familiar with the Battle of Saratoga. I don't think we've talked about it too much. Some of the fame that came out of that, it was a pretty significant turning point in the American Revolution. But also it was where Benedict Arnold really got his wings, as they would say in the mill. I guess they wouldn't have said it back then, but in a sense, like it was his claim to fame, as far as how he felt he should be respected in the military. It was a big win. Benedict Arnold played a significant role in that. And yeah, it's like right on the Hudson River, right?
Yeah, it's right on the Hudson River. It was a very important battle. Like Matt said, it was a turning point. By that point of the battle, we as the Americans, we didn't really have kind of, a big battle or, engagement with the British that we could, communicate to the world saying, hey, no, we're serious and we have a shot at winning this thing. And so by the British Army surrendering, that basically told the French, oh, these upstarts might actually do something. And that's basically what kicked off the French and American alliance, which many historians say without that, we would not have gained our independence. It's like almost without a question.
So to get into that, whatever, but really the real reason to go there was that this was also, people could consider it maybe the crowning jewel of John's boy Tadeusz Kościuszko's engineering feats during the military, and you could potentially credit him with a significant part of how they won the battle.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why we went there, figuring let's see what they have about this guy. I kind of, as we were driving, like, oh man, if they don't have anything about him, that would be so great. Because you know how John's always been, he's a big deal, and wanted to really see this and kind of prove his point to me, I think, was kind of part of it, but also wanted to see it for himself. It's a huge park. They had a driving tour there was a road that went all the way through it, right?
10 miles, one way. It's a one-way road.
Yeah, you had to go through the whole loop. We were warned about it, but I'm like, 10 miles, whatever. And they said it was a driving tour is what they called it, I believe. And they actually you could download audio. Like, so I assumed as you were in your car, you kind of follow it around. There might be areas to stop, and then there's a description and you can see it. But what we learned pretty shortly after starting it is you couldn't see, like, you can't really blame the park for this, I guess, but like you couldn't see anything really from the road. So you had to like stop your car. You had the audio, you had to listen, but then you had to park your car, get out and walk around. And then there was all this stuff on signs that basically had everything that they were saying to you in this recording in print.
Mm-hmm.
And John at first was walking around. I don't know if you remember this, John. You were walking around with that thing on speaker, standing right next to me. We were reading this plaque or this thing that they had for whatever spot we stopped at. And you were playing it on your phone, and it was literally the same thing that I was reading, but in a really annoying voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, can you just turn that off? I'm reading the same thing that they're saying.
And I did.
Thank God. I walked away then too. So I don't know if you have anything else to add as far as that goes. I mean, it was like real, because we didn't have a lot of time. I mean, we had a 6.5 hour drive coming back, and I didn't really plan to spend a ton of time at this park. I kind of thought that it was going to be a quick, like, in and out, see whatever. We did stop there was a memorial for Tadeusz Kościuszko. And we stopped there. That was like the second stop. It was like a obelisk, I guess, I think is what it was, right?
Yeah, it was it wasn't a statue of him. It was just like one of those
obelisk,
obelisk type thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we stopped there. We continued the thing. I blew past. There was one spot. It's a loop. The whole thing's a loop except one spot where you turned off of the loop to go see something.
To go see the thing that Kościuszko is known for at this particular battle. We just bailed on that.
Which I don't understand why his memorial wouldn't have been at that spot. So it's kind of weird. I kind of figured we were done with the Kościuszko part of it by the time we saw the obelisk there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I made a left. Nobody said, he didn't say anything. I'm like, we got to this like a T intersection and I'm like, I'm not going there. We got to go. And I made the left. And then as I made the left on the one-way road, he's like, that was the most important. I'm like, oh, whoops.
Maybe not the most important of the battle, but if you're there to see what Kościuszko's offering was to the battle, yeah, he'd set up fortifications at this spot called Bemis Heights on the Hudson River. And by how he set it up, that kind of diverted the British. The British couldn't just come down the Hudson. They had to get off further north. It was like kind of what did the setup for how the battle kind of would unfold. So his engineering feat at Bemis Heights. This one history professor says his choice of fortifying Bemis Heights on the Hudson River was probably one of the most important tactical decisions of the American Revolution. And we took a left.
Whatever. I didn't know. John didn't say anything.
Left.
Well, it happens. So anyway, so we continue and we leave. And then I guess that kind of got, from what I could only gather, that kind of got John that little taste of some Kościuszko praise celebration.
I knew he was excited. I just wanted the validation. I wanted you to hear. I wanted you to be validated. Yeah.
I think so. Like couple days, I don't even know if it was a full week later. John said, "Hey, I'm coming up. You want to go to the museum?" Maybe it was a week after we got back from the Saratoga trip.
It was very soon. I was starting a new job on October 1st. I had the weekend before that to go because this museum, it's only open half of the year in Philadelphia, and it's only open on Saturdays and Sundays. So I kind of had to either go now or wait until spring. And I was itching to get there. It's been on my bucket list for a while, as I mentioned to you guys before. And as well, the Wall Street Journal did an article on it a few months back now, recommending it. If you wanted to avoid the crowds, it's definitely a good place to go. And so we made it happen. I mean, when Matt sent me that invite for the Adirondacks, I pulled through. And then when I asked him if he wanted to come with me to Philadelphia, he said, "All right, let's do it." And that's where the adventure began. We did another trip into Philly.
Yeah, so basically this museum in Philly is it's just a house that he stayed at way after the American Revolution. We'll get into how he wound up there, but it was a place that he came to kind of as a respite. He had some injuries, he was getting better for that. And that's basically all that it was. And it was a big deal that he came to Philadelphia. He was a big deal, and pretty surprisingly, it seemed like that. Well, we'll get into it a little bit more, but that's basically why there's a museum for him in Philadelphia. Because I suppose if he wanted to call any place in America home, it would be Philadelphia. I think that's where he landed, and I think he just identified himself as a Philadelphian. And maybe as as we talk more about his life, these people who are fans who are from the Philadelphia area, or maybe people who aren't from the Philadelphia area but know people from Philly might realize that he does. As far as for a Polish person, he sure had that little Philadelphia grit to him. It seems like
he was pretty gritty, that's for sure.
So I guess let's get started. We'll talk about our day. One thing that I really want to talk about, it's kind of been eating me up since we talked about our trip to the Museum of the American Revolution, is John came on here talking game about how I usually go to Philadelphia taking the Norristown train line, but he's always gone taking the Paoli line, and that the Paoli train station is closer than the Norristown train station. And
I don't think that was ever my reasoning. I just said I'm a creature of habit, more or less, and that's what I've always done. I think the first time we went to Philadelphia. But
I think when we talked about it, and when I said let's go to Norristown, you looked at me crazy. Like Paoli's definitely quicker than Norristown, and you kind of looked at me crazy.
I guess I'm a little snooty when it comes to taking certain mass transit.
So I just want to say, so one thing, I'll admit, when we started our day, I was cranky and I was tired, and we got an early start. We had to get there. The park closes at 4, so John wanted to spend was planning 4 hours there. He wanted to get there at noon, so we had to get there a little early. I mean, it was a Saturday. It's not like I was had to set an alarm to wake up or anything, but I was a little groggy in the morning, a little cranky, and it was fine though. We couldn't get coffee. We had to go right to it because John's great idea was to park 3 miles away from the train station.
Yeah, so I've got family who live in the Paoli, Pennsylvania area, and they, I've parked there before. He's got, they have excess parking, where
how John pitched it to me, he was like, yeah, this gentleman who, we won't name the relation or anything, but John would say he lives right next to the train station. We'll just park there. So I'm thinking, all right, whatever. We could always, it's a big giant parking lot, but whatever, we'll park there. So we get to the train station, and as we get to the train station, so we drive past the train station. There's extra parking. I get it. There's extra parking where John knows where it is. We get to the train station, we pass the train station. I go, well, there's a train station. He said, oh, we're going to park at so-and-so's house. I say, okay. And then he keeps going. He crosses the intersection, goes down a block, makes a turn, another turn, another turn. I mean, we're driving for 5 minutes. I start losing my mind. It's raining outside, and I'm like, what is this? What?
Misting.
It was misting outside, okay. And I guess I could blame myself for not dressing
shorts
properly.
And a t-shirt.
It was September.
Still.
But anyway, he was blaming. I was losing my mind, and then he's blaming me for not being properly dressed. But we parked there. We walked in Dunkin' Donuts. It was probably a 15-minute walk from where we parked to the train station, would be my guess. When we could have just parked at the
12.
train station
I think we clocked it at 12. Don't tell our fans who. No. It was 12 minutes.
Okay.
You timed it.
I did time it. Okay, whatever. 12 minutes. So I'm just going to say out there, numbers don't lie. Paoli train station is 5 minutes closer to where we live than the Norristown train station. But the train ride is 13 minutes longer from Paoli to Philadelphia. So right there, Norristown is 8 minutes faster just going that way. You add the 12-minute walk, we're at 20 minutes longer. The process to get to Philadelphia is 20 minutes longer if you go through Paoli.
So that's a good day. And unfortunately, we decided to take the train
on a bad day. Train was 27 minutes late. Classic SEPTA. I mean, Saturday morning, no reason for it to be late except, I don't know, maybe the conductor overslept.
I think it was the remnants of that hurricane too were coming up from Florida. Right. A little bit of weather. And you just stay in bed.
We had a gentleman approach us and kind of butt in on our conversation.
Yeah. It was the classic. It's like, the times when strangers finally talk to one another, you're all being chapped because you're waiting for a train 25 minutes and one person makes an off the comment, oh, here we go. And then he's like, oh, yeah. And I'll start throwing shade at the SEPTA together. That's something we can have. It's a bond we can form and then, become friends for life sort of deal from a train station. But we met this gentleman. This was based on, we were talking about our trip to the Adirondacks and how something about us being lost or maybe being lost or John not having a map. We were talking about something like that. And this guy just buds in and goes, oh, my mom, back in the 70s, my mom got lost on an island. We were like, oh, wow. Mind you, this guy is wearing a Sherlock Holmes hat and a black duster. Guy was sleuthing out there. Turns out, I asked the question. I think I looked at Matt. I was like, oh, should I respond? He wants a question from us. I know he does. I can feel it brooding from him. And I was like, so, I like beer. You like beer, huh? He said he was going to breweries, right?
Is that what happened? Somehow he turned it into talking about beer. Is that how it was, or? Oh, we were talking.
British beer.
Yeah. We were because we were complaining about the train waiting, and then we were talking about how they should have a bar so that people could wait. That's what happened, right? People could wait and have a bar and actually they should make money off of it.
And then he immediately, Matt just said that, just making pleasant conversation as we're waiting for this late train. And he literally takes his phone out and he's like, "Oh, Paddington Station in London's got that." And we're like, "Excuse me." Like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, right. Then he just like Superman taking off of his normal outfit to get ready to save the world. He busts open his duster. Thankfully, he was wearing clothing. I was like getting worried about that. He busts open his duster to reveal a shirt that reads, "Beer is made from hops. Hops are plants. Beer equals salad." And but he doesn't acknowledge it at all. He busts it open, and then he's just, because it was closed. We're talking a little bit about beer, and then he's just like pacing back and forth with his duster wide open, showing off this T-shirt. So I think, obviously, just inviting us to ask him about it.
Yeah.
So I think I finally broke and was like, "Oh, that's some shirt you got there, huh?"
Yeah,
because I'm like taking notes. So I'm like taking notes I'm trying to take notes of our trip. So I immediately take my phone out and start taking notes about this guy. And I definitely wanted to get what his shirt said. So like I kind of made it like, oh, what's that shirt say? So I could really look at it to really say exactly what it was.
Yeah,
I hate people like that.
But then I asked him, hops. We got talking enough. He's like, "Oh, well, what are you doing there?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to some breweries." And where did he say he was going?
Ardmore. He was going to take like a freaking 3-hour long train ride.
Yeah, we crunched the numbers. Like, oh my gosh! Like, yeah. So he was already there 45 minutes waiting for this thing, and then he just had another hour and a half on the train. Just, wearing that shirt and that duster and that sweet hat.
But regardless, I think I wrote the note in there is, I would rather deal with the criminals in Norristown than these chooches they have in Paoli.
Oh, and chooches they do have.
It was crazy. That guy was weird. So yeah. So
once we got on the train, I don't think there was much drama.
Nah, it was fine. We were good. We got off the train. We kind of knew where we were going, because I think once we got into the city, John was hungry. We were both a little ornery, so we got some Italian beef. Couldn't find seating in Reading Terminal. What?
It was Italian pulled pork.
Oh, sorry, Italian
from
pulled
the
pork.
Nick's in Reading Terminal Market.
Yeah, a little bit of a tradition, I guess. We got them loaded up. Felt like chooches. We couldn't find a table. So we ate in the mall, the gallery in the mall next in the train station. We found this random table. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. We walked for miles looking for a place to sit down to finally eat these sandwiches. But anyway, so all that happened. John was able to wash his hands. He was happy. We got a good, nice, clean bathroom in the gallery.
That's it. I'm good. As it's our fans know, we might wash them too much, but I was a happy camper.
So finally, after a 27-minute delay of the train, having to deal with this chooch with his beers made from hops shirt, getting our food, not being able to find seats, all this stuff was happening. It was kind of like it was raining. We parked 15 minutes away from the train. All this stuff was just like boiling up like this. It wasn't a bad day, but it was like, wow, this is a process. Like so far, I don't know if you felt that way.
I knew
John,
it was.
like,
I feel like I knew it was going to be. I feel like just like when you have a Target that is a museum that's open Saturdays and Sundays for half of the year from noon to 4. It's like, I don't know, the stars are going to have to align for this to go off without a hitch. And again, because we're using SEPTA and going into Philadelphia.
And we're two freaking suburbanites going into the city, two people with no street smarts going into the city. It's not a good situation.
But that's why I wanted that extra time, give us that buffer so we could get there and the doors open. And we were pretty close. I feel like we got there probably at 12:30.
So we finally get in there. We find it. We finally get in there.
Well, wait, let's tell them where it is. It's in what, Old City?
Well, yeah.
In case they want to go. So it's on
What's
Pine
the street?
and Third.
What's the cross?
Pine and Third. Pine and Third.
It's Pine Street and 3rd Street in Old City, where all of the historical stuff is.
Yeah.
It's a nice area of the city, for sure. If you're going to go into the city of Philadelphia, Old City is probably the place to go.
Yeah, if you could avoid all the trains and everything and just be teleported to anywhere in Philly, I'd probably say that's the neighborhood.
Yeah, for sure. So we finally get in. It's an old house, old looking brick house. It's cool looking though. It's like really it seems authentic. We walk in, bust through the doors, and nobody's there except these 2 National Parks rangers kind of lounging in the chairs, just kind of like, what's up? That's kind of the feeling I got. Like, I can't imagine how many times they get people coming in and they're just like, what is this place? Or like they're just surprised when you run into people. Yeah. So, again, I bust in and like I told the two, we got Tadeusz Kościuszko's #1 fan here. And they were like, oh, and then he had a little bit of a talk about it. He talked again about the book that he read about him. And they were like, oh, that's cool. They kind of gave us a rundown
and
of the museum.
He busted out the book. He had the book too. He said, oh, I'm also reading it. It's a great book. You're leaving out key details to other fandom. Other people have fanboy, fangirl vibes with this guy. So.
Okay. So he's talking to him and they're having a good conversation with him for the most part, but they're kind of like, yeah, enjoy. Rightfully so. They're like, enjoy the museum. This is kind of how it's set up, and then enjoy. So I'm walking around. My eyes just focus onto this picture of Tadeusz Kościuszko in a bed, sprawled out, like in the Titanic, the Rose from Titanic naked pose on a couch. The first thing I saw when I walked in there. It was pretty wild. It was funny, and like I was like, John, look at this picture. I took a picture with my phone, and it just seemed to be the most common theme of the museum. You see that picture everywhere. It's on the pamphlets of the museum. He's kind of like leaned up just like Roses with his hand on his head like, oh boy.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit worse shape than Rose from Titanic.
Well, but I'm just saying, like, he's like it's like he's got his head on his hand. You gotta see this picture.
Like, have you guys been to, like, all the national parks always have like a little brochure you can take home, and the brochure for this place, which they have, you can grab when you walk in. It was that picture. It was that painting of him, like holding his on the couch, like holding his hand to his head, like oy vey, like
yeah, that it's an oy vey type pose, which is just it's funny. I think the reason that it's the picture, like there's obviously cooler pictures of this guy, but it's a picture depicting his time recovering at this house, so that's why it's there. Yeah. So we're walking around. So like the first area is like the museum, is like his American Revolution stuff. Kind of a lot of the stuff that we had already learned about in Saratoga. But as I'm like perusing around, we're all kind of perusing around. Me and him are perusing around. Then in comes this woman, and she just busts in. She's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's like, I don't know how she exactly introduced herself, but she's like, "I'm a history teacher in fourth grade in Virginia, and I know all about this guy." And then they're like, "Yes, she did." She's like, "Oh yeah, I know all about this guy. I was just teaching about him or something." And I'm like, listening. I'm like, history teacher, interesting. And then the national parks they're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. He's a pretty good guy. She's like, now he's the guy who taught the army how to be an army. And then it started dawning on me, and I'm hearing about this. It started dawning on me, this woman's confusing him for Baron von Steuben. Classic mix-up. And the national parks are, and so she comes in trying to be like, I'm so smart, I'm a history teacher, I'll teach you government employees whatever. And you could tell that the national park were like, oh yeah, I guess kind of like, they knew it too. And then like, yeah, I guess he kind of did, but you might be thinking of von Steuben. And I like nudged John. I'm like, oh boy, we got another one.
got one hook, line, and sinker on this one.
So it was just, she was like,
for the state
it was
of American,
very embarrassing.
For the state of American history classes.
It was pretty embarrassing. It was I would have been embarrassed if I was her for sure. And I think she maybe was, because I don't think she even lasted very long in the park. I guess if you call it, it's a park though. It is a park. It is a park though.
It's the smallest national park in the entire.
But she
country.
She didn't last very long. She kind of got like, we were all like, interesting, and then whatever. But the National Park Service people were actually being kind of nice about it, because I guess that at least they knew something, but like she knew something about it, but she knew nothing about Kościuszko for sure. Once they started talking about it, she just was like, whatever.
Yeah, she would have just been better off saying, I was in New York once going up to the Adirondacks and I crossed over a Kościuszko bridge. That was really just part of the highway.
Up an overpass. Yeah.
An overpass. I mean, she would have been better off with that. Would have been less judgmental.
So anyway, so what I figured is, this history teacher didn't know about it. This fourth grade history teacher from Virginia. I guess we have to take it upon ourselves as the Nailing History podcast to educate our listeners and any people, our listeners and, teachers and everything. As I said on my solo episode, I have a nephew in 7th grade learning about American history. So hopefully he listens to this episode and learns something for himself about who this fellow is. And maybe he can, really impress his 7th grade history class with some knowledge about this guy. So with no further ado, before we really get into the talk of how the museum is, kind of just want to go over Kościuszko's life. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because the museum is not laid out. Yeah, it's very American centric. I think as Matt said, as you walk in, but his life.
It's kind of like it starts off like showing about his American history. Then they have one room. It's small park. Obviously, it's a small park. They have one room that's about his background. Then you go upstairs and it's more about his American stuff. And then they have the room. But we'll get into that. So let's just get started in his early life. This guy, I mean, there is something to it. Like I said when we started this episode, he does have a bit of an air of Philadelphian in him, like a little bit of a grit. He's like a gritty guy. So, we'll let you guys be the judge on if we can present to you how he was and let us know what you think.
I do. Yeah, that sounds great.
He was born.
Go ahead and try to say his full name.
Well, no, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say he was he was raised in the middle class. I think as an American people, we, not to comment on anything more, we may have heard that sentence a little too much in the last 3 months. If you guys can follow me.
Buzz phrase.
Oh boy. But anyway, John, you got his name? You got his full name?
He was born Andres Tadeusz Bonaventura Kościuszko, English translation, Andrew Thaddeus Bonaventure Kościuszko, in February of 1746.
So I will say one thing that I left out with the National Park System people when we first walked in was one of the first things they did was give us a lesson on how to pronounce his name.
Kościuszko.
Yeah. Because I came in with, I don't know how I pronounced it. I know John's first time pronouncing it wasn't right. I mean, it's a hard one to do. And so we got it from the experts. I can confidently say that we are now pronouncing his last name right. Kościuszko.
Yeah.
Kościuszko.
Yeah. So he was, as Matt said, born middle class, but that wasn't really a distinction in the 18th century, but he was not born poor. He was not born into an aristocracy. He was kind of like middle, I guess you call it middle gentry. So like they had land, they had some serfs who are people that worked the lands.
His dad was in the army. His dad
was in the
officer.
army, which over history that usually brings some credibility and credentials, and you get land and property, whatever. So he was born in a well enough to do for himself.
Yeah, he did go to school, like his advanced learning, but he had to drop out because his family did end up like losing money, I think.
Yeah, his brother blew a bunch of the family estate, and he became a military engineer. That's kind of what he was known for, the Revolution. But he did a lot of self-teaching. He became a really good drawer. At one point, early on in his life, before he came to America, he went to France and other parts of Europe where he was kind of self-taught. And because he was Polish, he couldn't actually enroll into any of these academies. We know these military academies.
He was a member. He did join a Polish academy called the Corps of Cadets that educated military officers in Poland. And he graduate from that. He graduated from that, became a lieutenant, and then became a student instructor. So he was very interested. It seemed, I gather, he was very interested in the science and the real knowledge of like the real strategy and science of military from an early age, to the point where even though he graduated, I guess at that point there maybe wasn't an active war to do, so he felt the need to instruct. So he was definitely more on the side of the nerd end of military.
Yeah, he kind of, I think, looked at a whole picture, and certainly engineering, it's a major part of wars and logistics. I think he kind of definitely took to that, but he wasn't afraid to run from a fight, as we'll find out later in his life. But yeah, he kind of became more or less self-taught and went to all these different academies, and kind of just was a fly on the wall. in France and the like. But to kind of give a bigger picture of kind of, why kind of the world he was born into, or I guess that he, became a man in, really. So at the time, Poland was its independent kingdom, but over the course of his life, it would slowly be carved up by the three major powers in Central Europe at the time, which were Austria, Prussia, and Russia. And so basically, all three of these great powers were kind of seething at the mouth, foaming at the mouth, trying to basically, have their own influence and sway and take some land and property and take land away effectively from the Polish and Lithuanian, residents. And so the Russians were very, very, very big in kind of, having their sway. Catherine the Great, who was the Empress of Russia at the time, she kind of shacked up with the King of Poland to try to have influence and sway on him. But when he was of age, so not long after he graduated from that Corps of Cadets in Warsaw, you had the first partition of Poland, and that's when they first started getting kind of carved away. He didn't fight in that one. He was too busy kind of running around trying to flirt with a very influential and very wealthy aristocrat, his daughter.
Well, you're kind of missing a point of his life.
Which part?
He traveled around to Paris, and he did return to Poland when that was going on. But at that point, his brother lost a ton of the family money and land while he was away in Europe. And when he came back, that's when he couldn't afford an officer's commission, right. And that's why he ended up not joining the army.
That's right.
So it's not that he was too busy; it was that he couldn't afford an officer's commission, so he wasn't able to. He wasn't noble enough. So because of that, he ended up just becoming a tutor for some fancy man, and I don't know, was that in France or was that in Switzerland?
No, this was back in Poland.
Where he took a tutoring for the fancy man's family.
The fancy man's daughter, who he took a liking to.
Yeah.
And they secretly eloped. Okay. And then word got back to the dad, and he's like, like, you can't marry out of your class, and you're certainly not going to marry my daughter. So he basically had to flee for his life.
His dad had his henchmen like beat him up and chase him after him. So he bailed because of that.
Yeah, he bailed, and he eventually got wind that there was a revolution going on in America, and
he fled to Paris, and that's where he found out.
Yeah,
because I guess it was all the talk. It was all the talk in like Paris, which would make sense. The French hated Britain, so they're like, "Oh, these Americans they're trying to." Good for him, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think that kind of gave him like, oh, underdog story. That's all about me.
Yeah.
Remember, Philadelphia, Kościuszko. That sounds familiar.
Polish. Getting shafted.
You think about the Broad Street Bullies. He probably would have been a member. A little underdog action. So he learned about that. Then he came to America.
1 month after the Declaration of Independence was signed.
Just he was like jacked up because he smelled revolution, and he was all about revolution from the whole situation with Poland and Russia. And he was an advocate of human rights and the American cause in general. So he was like all pumped up and was like, I'll sign up. Yeah. Even if he's not part of his country, he's like, I'll do it. He sees oppression from from England, I guess, to America, and he wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely a son of liberty.
Because unfortunately, he wasn't allowed to do it for his own country.
That's right. So he had to go to an adopted land, which America would certainly become in his life. But so he shows up in Philadelphia in August of 1776, and I guess I don't know how he gets his address. He manages to find his way to Ben Franklin's house, and he basically just goes to his door, knocks on the door and says, hi, I want to sit your officer's exam. Like I want to, he thought.
Engineer's exam.
Sorry?
Wasn't it? It was an engineer's exam.
Engineer's officer. I think they were included together, but just like a very formal exam. He thought, like they have in France or, the older countries of Europe. he thought, America, they must have like a formal way of assessing who's could be a qualified officer or engineer, what have you. And Ben Franklin's like, yeah, we don't have that. But he did say, I can give you a geometry exam, maybe a little more basic for you. So he gives him that, and Kościuszko crushes it, flying colors. And Ben Franklin's like, effectively, like, you're hired. Like, let me talk to my people, being, those people being like John Hancock, and we'll get you commissioned into the Army. And that's kind of what happened. Yeah, he was given an assignment, and one of the first things he did was put these spikes in the Delaware River that kind of like you put these rocks formation, and then you have these like wooden pikes sticking out of it in the water. So if there was like any British ships coming into trying to make their way into Philly, puncture the holes of the ship. And Ben Franklin was super impressed by that. So like, wow, we got a smart one here. We can't let this guy go.
Let's send them up to northern upstate New York.
Yeah, so they sent him up to upstate New York. One of the first places he's sent to is Fort Ticonderoga. He's asked to kind of survey that. And the big thing that happened there is, again, he comes here. He's this Polish guy. Actually, everyone thought he was French because he only spoke French. So they didn't even know he was Polish. But he goes up to Fort Ticonderoga, and he kind of does his assessment. And there's apparently Fort Ticonderoga, which is way in upstate New York, not far from where Matt and I were, but it's up on the Hudson River. It's north of Saratoga. Super important, fortification at the time. And I think it's a place where Benedict Arnold gets pantsed at one point. Ethan Allen. Didn't we talk about that once? They were sent up there. Anyway, he's up there, and he's asked, he's trying to do his assessment and find ways to fortify. And he always said, we got to find the high ground. So there's this site overlooking Fort Ticonderoga, and he's like, we got to put cannons up there. We got to put guns up there, because if we don't do it, the British are going to.
And the rest, don't be such a worry ward, Tadeusz. Don't worry about it. We're good. That's crazy. Yeah. That's too much work. Classic. I mean, this is just like, there's probably not many listeners who live in my world, but the difference between engineers and construction workers, this is the battle that we deal with, the same exact thing. Like, well, maybe we should do that. Don't worry about it, college. Oh, what'd you learn that? And would you read that in the book one time? Kościuszko. Oh, yeah, high ground. I'm not doing that. It's too much work. It's classic. That's what happened. And guess what? Bit him in the butt.
They did not choose to, to arm this high ground, put cannon up there to, basically as defensive works against the British. Long story short, British end up doing it, and then very soon after, the Americans have to evacuate Fort Ticonderoga, and the British take
everyone was like, oh, maybe we should listen to that guy.
Yeah, made a bit of a whoopsie, but he's actually partly responsible. So they all flee, and they have to come down south, down the Hudson River, and that's kind of where this campaign that would culminate in Saratoga begins. So they start making their way down south on the Hudson River, and he's kind of responsible, I guess, call it like maybe a bit of a rear action retreat. So while they're coming through these super dense forests in the Hudson Valley there, he and his team are kind of finding ways to fell the trees so that they can delay the British from moving, quickly.
They're trying to get to New York City. This is all to stop them from taking the Hudson down to New York City.
Yes, because you get that. I mean, that was like the waterway of the colonies. That was one of the major waterways up into French Canada, or British Canada, sorry. If the British got in control all of the Hudson River, it would be bad news bears. So they're coming down after they abandoned Fort Ticonderoga. They're felling trees. They do a really successful job. So whatever he did, so his superiors started noticing, like that actually really bought us some valuable time.
Well, I think that and the Ticonderoga thing, they're like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, they're like, he wasn't.
Give him a shot.
He wasn't on rock star status yet. He was like, oh, this guy's smart. This Polish engineer, can't say his name, can't write his name. We'll keep an eye on him.
Seems like a bit of a goofball. I heard I heard
he got ran out of Poland chasing some tail.
For some what a loser, but let's start listening to him. Classic engineer v contractor thing. Like, this guy's just telling us what to do. He's not doing it himself. That kind of stuff.
And he was self-conscious.
But then they say, so then they get the we already talked about Saratoga, so we don't really need to get into it in any more detail, but they get to Saratoga and they say, all right, let's give this guy a shot. Right.
Yeah. So he fortifies Bemis Heights. He comes with his plan.
And they finally listen to him and they win.
Yeah.
And they give him a lot of credit for it.
Give him a lot of credit for it. France sides with us. Like, word gets to France. Ben Franklin, totally at that point, he would have been a diplomat, an ambassador out there. So, he got word and he would have been milking that for everything he could. And yeah, the French and American alliance would begin as a result of this battle.
Kościuszko gets down to West Point. George Washington's like, this guy's the man. Everybody starts liking this guy. Let's start listening to him. But then I think in classic Tadeusz fashion, where he was more of a salt of the earth type guy. Mm-hmm. Growing up middle class, as we talked about. He's like, you know what? I'm ready to get my hands dirty. I'm done with this engineering thing, or maybe not necessarily done with it, but I want to do a little bit more. And he asked for a commission to be able to get some guys to fight and actually get his hands dirty down south.
Yeah. George Washington personally granted Kościuszko's request to transfer to combat duty with the Southern Army. And his West Point fortifications were praised as very innovative at the time. And so Washington was like, all right, dude, you can do whatever you want. You're single-handedly winning this war for us.
So the North was taken care of pretty much at this point with all the stuff that was done, the Saratoga and all that stuff. The North was, in generally, there wasn't much action anymore, and it was all down the Southern theater. Mm-hmm. So I think Kościuszko realized that and was like, I want to get down there. I want to get my hands dirty. So then he started fighting, and he started fighting under my boy Nathaniel Greene, who was running the show down there. And Nathaniel Greene loved him, and they did some damage down there. I don't know if there's any definitive a big change. I think
he was responsible for making these boats, these like flat bottom boats that were super important in one. I think there was one battle which wasn't going well, and they were able to use those boats to cross the river. Otherwise, they would have been routed.
Yeah. So anyway, he was in. I think at one point he was in the last. He was involved in the last major skirmish in the war. But one thing that I read that was pretty cool. He had a sword that he carried around with him during the war, and it was inscribed with the words, "Do not draw me without reason. Do not sheathe me without honor."
Pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome. Now that is I was thinking that would be a pretty funny tattoo to put. Like, I guess maybe your bicep would be cool. Like, don't draw me without. I don't know.
Like on both
pretty
arms,
cool.
Just like half the logo, the slogan.
Don't draw me without reason. Don't sheathe me without honor. Like in the middle. Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
I was thinking, it just reminded me, like, maybe Charles Lee could have used that advice during the Battle of Monmouth, where he was retreating and Washington says, you'd all not have undertaken it unless you intended to go through with it, when he talked about how he was retreating. So I thought, pretty polar opposites between Charles Lee and Tadeusz Kościuszko. And I wonder what Tadeusz Kościuszko would have thought of Charles Lee. Probably would have scoffed at him.
Oh, I'd say so. Yeah.
So then I guess, just to not get into too much in the weeds, then after the war, he leaves back for Poland. But as John suggested, or John already alluded to, he didn't get paid for his service.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm
late 1783. He became a naturalized American citizen. So after the war and after the Treaty of Paris was concluded, he was deemed a naturalized citizen. And he was going to be responsible for putting on a fireworks display for the 4th of July of that year. But he's like, I gotta go. I gotta go. I miss my home.
Yeah.
And he was promoted to brigadier general too. That was the big thing.
He did receive a certificate while he was before he left. He received a certificate, which I guess is like a promise, or like a bond,
promissory note, right?
That he would receive $12,280 at 6% interest, which in 2022 dollars, that's $323,000 paid in installments of $19,400 a month. That's pretty sweet. That's a lot of money for not that much many years of work, right? 1776 to 1783. 7 years. Well, I guess that's not.
I don't know if all generals were given that, but that was a big point of contention. Everyone's like, well, he needs to leave the service with a general's commission in order to be qualified for that pay, as well as 500 acres of land, which is really we look at it now, how much every property costs now. Imagine me sitting on 500 acres of land. I think in Ohio is where they'd given it to him.
Wow.
What is now Ohio? It's a lot of money.
I guess you're not up on the current lingo of the youth generation, but the word Ohio means like whack. Do you not
it's
know
also
that?
a state. What?
You never heard that?
No.
Yeah, that's a whole thing where like if you say like, dude, that's so Ohio, that means like it's whack. So I'm learning from my nephew who hates to talk about it, but yeah. Like if you have Ohio Riz, it means like you're whack. So
what if you say like, that's Ohio? You're just like describing some
whack.
scene in Cincinnati. And you're like, oh, it's so Ohio.
Well, I think that's the point is like Ohio's lame. People from Ohio are lame.
So you're saying Tadeusz Kościuszko.
I'm just saying the land might not be worth that much if kids these days are calling it skibbity out there. You got to get up with the lingo, John. But anyway, yeah, I get it. So he got promised mad bank, but I guess at that point you could promise anybody
made a general.
You could promise anybody anything because they weren't going to get it anyway. So whatever.
He was there when Washington gave down his commission, Francis Tavern up in New York. He was there. Right along. He
was like crying.
Inducted into the Society of the Cincinnati, and he wore that medal. Like a lot of the paintings he's in, there's a picture of him wearing the medal from Society of the Cincinnati, which is it was a super important.
So anyway, so really, his real claim to fame, like in the worldwide history, we haven't even got to yet, because then he leaves America back for Poland. And when he gets back to Poland again, his brother's still being a bum, losing his family's land and losing his money. So like he still can't afford an officer's commission. But then he finally gets it in 1789.
Mm-hmm.
An officer's commission. He gets paid 12 grand zealots a year. What was lotties? I don't know how you say it, but which is apparently a lot of money. Kind of it takes care of his financial problem once he finally becomes an officer in the Polish army. So then in 1790, so as John kind of alluded to, Poland was getting split up. Russia really wanted Poland, and all this stuff was going on. And then finally in 1792, for like the third time, or one final, like while he's over there, 1792, the Russian army crossed the Polish border, finally starting the Polish-Russian War of 1792.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Catherine the Great was furious that the Polish, in the vein of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, they came out with a constitution, which, absolute monarchs hate. She wanted to have all this influence in Poland, and she's like, yeah, we're not having any of that. So Russian troops moved in.
He was an officer. He didn't lose a single battle during that war, even though Poland or whatever the Commonwealth, whatever you would consider, they lost the war, but TK didn't lose a single battle.
Yeah, the Russians had a 3-1 advantage in men too. So, I mean, it was probably a foregone conclusion, but they fought hard. And but he then eventually would lead an uprising that now bears his name.
In 1794. Fought very diligently, but in that battle where he was dressed as this is where he got his name, the Peasant Prince, is his nickname. He, leading his army of literal peasants. They were arming peasants who were going to fight this, trained and formal Russian army. They held their own, and he donned a peasant's coat, so he wasn't able to be seen on the battlefield. So like the Russians couldn't just target an officer. Back in the day, if you were on a horse and you had all these medals on and stuff, it's like you were kind of a clear sign that you were an officer and an easy target. So he kind of kept it a bit more of a low profile. But he did sustain two major injuries. He took a pike in the back, and he got his sciatic nerve severed. So then he ended up falling like face down in the mud, and the Russians were looking for
this officer who, has just been the bane of their existence for a number of years at this point. And they eventually find him and haul him away to Russia on Catherine the Great's orders. And then he's taken to Russia, and along with 12,000 other Poles.
Yeah, 12. Yeah, and at this point, just in the grand scheme of history, Poland failed to exist. After this was the end of Poland. After this uprising, this was the final end of Poland as a country for 123 years.
Yep.
So that was the impact that played.
So his country was gone. His home country effectively just off the map.
Yeah, so he was bummed. He fought so hard for. He was bummed.
Yeah. So then he would spend the next 2 years in a Russian prison. And one of the key things that happened was, he might have just rotted there for the rest of his life had Catherine the Great kept living. But she died, and her son,
finally,
Paul the First, who hated his mother, he hated her.
He was like, "Mommy."
Uh-huh.
I don't know what I was going to say. I was going to say something like, Mom doesn't understand.
You never let me do my thing. I want to run an empire.
Yeah, I kind of get that feeling from him. Like, I want to, when's it going to be my turn, Mommy?
Yeah, and I think
that's what it was.
Maybe he knew that by freeing, to destroy her legacy, by freeing this Polish patriot who she hated, that would really just chap her in the grave,
Yeah.
So he, what was on condition of his release, he was given
12,000 rubies,
substantial amount of money, and he was able to leave Russia.
He was given the money, a sword, and a sweater. Not a sweater, but that's what I wrote down. What is it?
Bearskin jacket?
I don't think it was a jacket.
Coat.
I don't know.
Coat.
Maybe a coat.
And
he ended up giving it. He gave it to his boy Thomas Jefferson. It was a cool coat.
It's a cool coat. And if you ever go to the Jefferson Memorial, you see the statue of Thomas Jefferson in that memorial. He's wearing that coat, and in his official presidential portrait, he's also wearing the coat.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you ever see a picture, a painting of Thomas Jefferson rocking a crazy bear skin coat, it's the coat that Kościuszko gave him.
So freaking cool. Hey, so when Poland failed to exist for these 123 years, like I said, was the 123 years the end of World War I? And that's the 14 points and everything that we were talking about. Look at that connection.
There you go.
Look at that connection. Anyway, just to make a point that Kościuszko really was conflicted on agreeing to those terms of being released from prison because he didn't want to pledge allegiance to Russia. The only reason he did it wasn't for the money, wasn't for the sweet sword, wasn't for the cool bearskin coat, but it was because they were going to release 20,000 prisoners.
Polish, those that fought with him in battle. In some cases, some of these peasants who fought with him.
That's the only reason. It was I'll do it. You give me that stuff. I don't care about that stuff. But really, the only reason I'm doing it, which I think he tried to make it as clear as possible, is I don't care about that stuff. Which is why he gave the sweater away. He's I don't even want this.
I mean, he's probably a little kind of feeling a little down too, because he gave an oath of loyalty. It wasn't just that he was given stuff and you can go. He had to give an oath of loyalty, and then Paul first said, "Well, we'll give you some stuff too to get you on your feet. You've been in prison for 2 years, and just don't flee Europe now. Don't go fleeing Europe on us because we'll have our spies on you. But
don't come back to Poland.
Don't go. There's no Poland for you."
So he got even though Poland didn't exist, he got banished from the whole area.
Yeah, gone.
And so he left. And where's he going to go? His second home, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, birthplace of freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. So he was still on the mend. He was not, I don't think those wounds were really healing very well in a Russian prison. He managed to flee Europe. He had some Russian spies on his tail, as I briefly mentioned. And so he kind of had to give him the slip. So he had to flee to America via Stockholm and London. And he left he left Britain in June of 1797, and he arrived in Philadelphia on August 18th. And he was given a hero's welcome by the town, although...
Not John Adams and his boys.
Yeah, as some of our fans know, in 1797, the Federalists were in power. John Adams was in power. It was Alien and Sedition Act and a possible war with France were on the table. So he kind of showed up at a bit of a precarious time in this country. And but no, he had a hero's welcome, and Thomas Jefferson welcomed him basically with open arms. And yeah, but the reason why he ended up at this little house on 3rd and Pine is because he had a secretary of his. I won't say his name because I'd butcher it, but he'd been with him for a while and through a lot of his travels and whatnot. And he basically told his secretary, like, find me the cheapest, find me a dwelling as small, as remote, and as cheap as possible. And so what his secretary found was this boarding house on Pine Street that was run by a Mrs. Ann Relf. And he got a little room on the second floor of the house.
Second floor, yeah. And they actually, the place was so small that this museum, which is tiny to begin with, was actually 2 houses merged together. They blew through the middle wall so that like you could actually have room to walk around. So it was even half the size of what we were going through. But they do have they have like a little idea of what the museum, what his room would have looked like. You can't go inside; it's behind glass, similar to the Washington's tent, which is kind of lame.
Yeah,
but you could look in and see there were some cool things in there. The chessboard. He was probably pretty good at chess, be my guess.
So he only stayed at this boarding house from August 1797 until March of 1798. So what?
Like 7 or 8 months.
7-8 months,
One thing that we did see in that room, John, that we should mention was that hatchet peace pipe that we saw, which I thought was cool. You pointed that out. You're like, look at that. That thing's cool.
That was a gift to him by Chief Little Turtle of the Miami tribe, a very prominent visitor.
Was a very familiar thing to see because, as I believe we talked about it on our Harper's Ferry trip, that was also shown in the Lewis and Clark, in the Lewis Meriwether like exhibit at Harper's Ferry, as like something that they would bring with them to give as a gift to the Native Americans. Mm. So maybe that
peace and
that
war.
might have been. What if that peace pipe was actually from Lewis Meriwether and just made its way back to Kościuszko? It's possible.
Well, the one from Meriwether
same way
after.
What?
Wasn't Meriwether given that in
that's
1803?
Yeah.
So Kościuszko would have had to give it up.
Maybe Meriwether jacked it from Kościuszko and was like, oh, possible.
Maybe
there's like a skirmish that they had. They had a big fight, Meriwether and Kościuszko.
Historical record questions it, but maybe ChatGPT can give us a what if.
Yeah, maybe
possibility, but yeah.
Sorry, I had my timeline off there, fan. Sorry, my bad.
So in this 7 months that he was recuperating, he had a number of visitors come to see him. One of the most important being was the vice president at the time, Thomas Jefferson, and they formed a really close bond during his stay, and one that would kind of stay with them the rest of their lives. They'd exchange a lot of letters. For the majority of most of their lives after the fact. And as I said, a Chief Little Turtle of the Miami, Supreme Court Chief Justice, or William Patterson, and a number of others visited him in his short stay. So word got out, did you hear who's back in town? Did you hear who's back in town? The South Street Brawler, or what is it? South Street Brawlers?
Broad Street Bully. Yo, let's talk to him. I heard stuff went pretty crazy over in Poland. Let's get some stories. Let's get the dirt. Let's get the tea.
Yeah.
Dude. Like he's like in there, they show up, they're like, dude, what happened, bro?
And he's got his bandage on his head and someone's painting him. He's like, oh, vey. And there's like a painter painting him. Oh, yeah. But he was like a rock star. So he's like of the sale of like a Marquis de Lafayette. Some of our fans we talked about before, like just a big deal foreign fighter kind of thing who really had a big impact on the fight and on the history of this country. And but he was so much more than that, beyond. I mean, as Lafayette probably had stuff in France during the French Revolution, Kościuszko obviously lived call it a second life in Europe. But always one for liberty.
Which ultimately he had to get back to after 7 or 8 months in Philadelphia.
Certainly did.
You only spend that much, and he went back to France. You know how he got back to France? His boy TJ hooked him up with a fake passport.
Classic.
That is epic, dude. That's a cool little tidbit there.
That's cool think about that. Like the vice president of the country is already like,
yeah, but you
don't worry about it. I got you.
Well, you know why he did it? Because, part of the reason why he had to leave because of the Alien and Sedition Act. He's like, I got to get out of here. I'm going to get in prison, and TJ's like, I got you, fam. Because TJ was part of the Sedition Act too.
Well, I need the whole
purpose of the whole purpose of that Alien and Sedition Act was that was a way for possibly to get Thomas Jefferson arrested for talking trash on John Adams, right?
I'm a Federalist. It was the Federalists' way. I'm going to just say John Adams. Just say the Federalists' way of trying to silence their opposition.
Yeah, John Adams was more of a puppet. I feel like at that point. So
yeah, Hamilton, you could probably say would be more of the guy. Boom.
So they were like, I got you, dog. I'm going to get you a fake passport. And he's like, oh, I don't know. What about? And then Thomas was like, don't worry about it. I'm going to break the Constitution in a couple of years anyway when I buy Louisiana. So don't worry about it. I'm a lawbreaker. What an awesome team. Like that would be a cool, they would be like a Batman and Robin situation. I feel like. And surprisingly to most people, I feel like Kościuszko would have been Batman to Thomas Jefferson's Robin.
For a time, yeah, I would say so. He had the fight. I mean, Jefferson never fought in the Revolution or anything else.
But he did, before he left, he did collect his back pay, I believe, for his service. But I think he only got the principal, I think is what we gather.
He was going to take the principal. I think I have this correct, but so in this relation, the big thing in this relationship that he would end up in the bond he would form with Thomas Jefferson, it was kind of, they had a really close friendship from, the sake of, talking about liberty and in the early days of the American Republic. But a big note was that Kościuszko was a big proponent of, call it individual liberty, no matter your, race or other circumstance, nationality. So he couldn't understand coming from Poland, where he had, serfdom, which was effectively slavery, was existent. He couldn't see how could you come here and fight for the cause of liberty and freedom and still have all these slaves, in your society. So an agreement that he came to with Thomas Jefferson, he said, well, hey, I'll take some of my principal money owing that Congress owes me, but I want to use I want to use interest and I want to set up my whole estate to free the slaves, and not only just any slaves, but I want to buy your slaves. I want to manumit your slaves. So when you die, I want my money to pay for your slaves' freedom. Did not end up happening. And his will got really complicated, and
because Thomas Jefferson was like, when he got to a certain age, he's like, I can't do this anymore. Sorry, TK.
It got complicated, yeah. And up until the 1850s, they were still looking at can we execute Kościuszko's will? And it was like, no, this thing is dated and it's done. So, but
So he went back to France, met up with our boy Napoleon. Turns out TK and Napoleon, not them boys. As much as
he thought they could be.
TK and TJ were them boys, TK and Napoleon were not them boys. I don't think he really trusted him.
Well, he got excited that so he got word when he was still in Philly that he was getting letters saying, hey, we got these, some of his Polish comrades or whatever. Hey, we got this another upstart, Bonaparte Napoleon, who's taking over Europe, and maybe, he's taking out all of these, monarchies, and, maybe he can help the Polish fight. Maybe he can help us get Poland back. And so he got excited by that. That's when he was like, I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta meet this guy. We gotta work together. We gotta put our heads together here. And by the 1798, 99, I don't think Napoleon had called himself emperor just yet, but it was getting pretty close. Kościuszko, like a lot of people in America.
Hey, we all know how easy that is to do.
Yeah. It happens. It happens. Exactly. 50 years before Mr. Norton. But obviously, Kościuszko, although he was a major proponent of human rights and individual liberty, call it, he thought, like many in America, he thought the French Revolution, while it started out well in principle, obviously in
got
action.
a little out of hand.
Didn't, and it got a little touching, a little out of hand. So the reign of terror. So he thought it was abhorrent. So I think when he saw someone like a Napoleon come in, bring some level of stability or whatever.
I don't think he saw it any better than what Russia was doing. I would guess.
I think he came to that conclusion about Napoleon. Like he was just a tyrant. Yeah, he called him a tyrant, and he called him.
He's doing what to these other countries what Russia did to Poland.
Exactly.
It's kind of how he felt.
Yeah.
And then after the fall of Napoleon, Alexander I wanted TK to return to the Polish area to like make things chill in Poland again, like kind of be like he wanted him to be like a good ally to Russia, like in Poland, I think, so that they could like kind of rule it together or whatever. But which he was, I think, excited about at first, but then when he got there and realized how small Poland was going to be, like how little land they were actually going to give as like to recognize as Poland, he called it a joke.
Yeah. They wanted to kind of Napoleon kind of wanted to masquerade him around. So like
but this was after Napoleon, is what I'm saying. This was Alexander I who wanted him to come back and be boys with Russia.
Oh. Well, I was referring to Napoleon and Napoleon's foreign secretary or foreign Talleyrand.
I could see them. There's probably not to interrupt, but I think what you're getting to maybe is that Kościuszko had this representation of being like a very a revolutionary, but with a very just, noble cause.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I think if Napoleon, like, hey, this guy's on my side, everyone, maybe legitimate him, his like legit. Is legitify a word?
It legitimizes what their actions, France's
yeah.
actions, whatever they may be. Yeah, so exactly right. So Napoleon's French minister Talleyrand basically petitioned Kościuszko for moral and public endorsement for the French fight against Prussia, who were one of the partitioners of Poland. And I think, I think Kościuszko wised up, like you said, to there being an ulterior motive to France wanting his support. He's like, oh, you just want me because I'm a face and I'm an image and I have all this history and you just want to use me for that, but you're just as big of a joke as these clowns in Russia and Prussia and Austria.
Yeah, it's the whole thing's just a mess.
So
like he didn't trust any of it. At that point, I think he didn't have a home. He didn't see himself getting a home. So he's just continued to live the rest of his life in France and Switzerland.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
So I guess whatever he said did not get his head cut off. I mean, he obviously, whatever he said, I think he got enough respect and street cred through all of his years of fighting and what he did around the world that Napoleon just, I guess, left him alone and he just stayed in France.
Then he wound up in Switzerland, which is where he died.
Did end up in Switzerland.
He died after falling off a horse and then died of stroke complications afterwards. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter. I guess you could pretty much sum up what Kościuszko actually meant to the country. And, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, when he died, he wrote a letter to Franz Zeltner, who was Kościuszko's host family while he lived in Switzerland. The opening sentence is, "Sir, I received but lately your favor of October 29th announcing to us the death of General Kościuszko. To no country could that event be more afflicting, nor to any individual more than to myself." Which I think means he was bummed that his boy died.
Yeah, they were.
He was, what was he, 71 when he died?
What is that? 1817. 1817 minus 7. 71.
There you go.
71. A hero on multiple continents.
So that was the life of Kościuszko. Did we leave anything out, John?
No, we do after it. So his body was kind of, when he died, they kind of cut up his body a little bit to like honor him. So his heart is in the Royal Castle of Warsaw. I think to this day, there's a picture of him on his Wikipedia page. And then the rest of his remains were interned at the Wawel Cathedral in a sarcophagus in Krakow.
Where's
Poland.
that? So both in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
and he's,
we'll get a little bit more. I want to just get our final thoughts on him at some point. Just a little summary, but I think that's a pretty good description of his life. We went on pretty long, but I think deserved it.
Mm-hmm. He did a lot. He did a lot over the years.
Let's just get back to reality. So that's the story of him, and then let's just wrap up our trip to the museum. So then, as we were leaving, one thing just to get back to like current present day, as you would say, we're leaving the museum. We go through the whole museum, spend a decent amount of time there. I want to say we probably spent a little bit over an hour there, right?
Yeah, I'd say about an hour.
Easily, maybe 2 hours. I mean, we spent a long time there for how small it is. And, we were the last ones there. So a couple people walked in, the teacher did, and other whatever. And as we're leaving, we're the only ones there, and get up to the desk, and we're like, let's talk to these guys. The same park rangers were just still lounging in their chair, just chilling, and I don't know how we started talking about it, but I guess, did we just say like how did you guys wind up working at this museum? I don't know exactly how we started talking about that. And it was great. I mean, they were like, yeah, dude, they were very professional about it and like kind of nerdy because they're like, well, I don't want to say that because they might be listening. They're very professional about it, but they were basically like, I don't know, man, like we just split time with the Independence National Park, which is Independence Hall and all that stuff over the more popular area for sure. Like, because this place is only open like 8 hours a week, I mean, we just kind of rotate in and out. So like my initial thought was just like, I envision like these guys out with their boys, like partying on a Friday night, comes to 11 o'clock. And, if you've ever been out before on like a work night or whatever, and you're like, all right, guys, I gotta go home. And like, you have that, you're right at that edge of like one more beer and you might as well stay out till 2 o'clock in the morning at that point. But like, you're right at the edge, like, I gotta go. And then the guy, it's like your friends are like, come on, man, just one more beer. And then your thought is, I got Kościuszko in the morning. I'll be skate by.
You got to open it at noon.
Yeah, like no big deal. Tomorrow's my I got the easy weekend shift of Kościuszko Museum, which I thought was funny to think about. It's also funny to think about because we did run into, on our way there, we ran into a little mini-me dwarf. A little person, national park ranger. We saw him actually. I believe we saw him when we went to
from that general area. He was coming from the area of the Kościuszko.
But I think we saw him when we were at the American Revolution too, like in the spring too. I feel like we had seen him there. But anyway, very short little person, and we just had to laugh and think like, wouldn't it be funny if he was at this
permanently
park
assigned?
It's just kind of like, the smallest park ranger might as well be assigned to the smallest park. Why am I always here? Now to think about it, getting assigned, like, it'd be funny if he just kept getting assigned there, and he's like, why do you guys keep assigning him to me?
You just know so much. You're doing so great.
If we would have seen him, if we would have opened those doors and he would have been there, it would have been game over. We would have had to leave the museum. I would have been laughing too hard. That would have been so funny.
Yeah, and obviously we're not.
Welcome to the smallest national park.
To any of our listeners out there who may be or know a little person, we're just having good fun.
Yeah,
this is the Theo Vaughn disclaimer. We're just having good fun. We're just keeping
it. That would be hilarious. That would be funny, and I would never. Missed opportunity, if you ask me. That
it would have been even better if he admitted it. He's like, yeah, they keep putting me here. Smallest park ranger, smallest national park.
Yeah, like,
makes sense.
Yeah,
like, he knows it.
Yeah, if you would embrace it, it would have been good. That was funny. But then we were talking. We're kind of like, hey, talking to these people, just having a good talk, and we mentioned the podcast. We mentioned the podcast a couple times. So hopefully they're listening. We did have somebody recently download our whole catalog in one day. So I'm hoping it's one of those guys. I don't know where they're from, but hopefully it's one of them. And hopefully they're listening to this. But, we did say, hey, if you... I'm kind of saying, like, they should have a movie about this guy. They just made a movie about Napoleon, who was a jerk. Like, maybe they should make, like, a positive... I didn't say that, but I thought it afterwards. Like, I feel like make it about a positive person. And we were thinking, like, who would play Kościuszko? Mm-hmm. I said Timothy Chalamet.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have an answer. I don't think they've been asked that question by anybody else.
And then, we got really excited. So we were kind of spitballing, well, who could play in a made for movie, TV series. And
I think that was their response was this. The response was, and maybe rightfully so, because we're coming up to 2 hours on our podcast just talking about the guy. Probably should be like a multi-part TV series instead of a movie. That would be tough to do.
Yeah, but one of the park rangers, she tried to she got going for a second. She got really excited. She's like, "Oh yeah, well." She looked at the other guy. She's like, "Wasn't there a play put on in Philadelphia about his life and times? Or there's a play."
Isn't it at Independence Hall? And like she's kind of talking about like present day. I saw John's pants got a little tighter when he heard this. I could say that much.
True. And then she's like, "No, I think it was in when was that? In like the 70s? Like was that like in the 1970s?" And we were like, "Oh."
Yeah,
that's cool.
Kind of like, yeah, cool. Like,
was it filmed?
Kind of a bummer.
Did somebody record it? Can I watch it, or what's going on?
Yeah,
that was funny.
So then, as we were talking to these people, this other couple came in while we were there, and it was an older gentleman and a younger woman, I believe, right? And they're like, "Oh, you guys are open," and he's kind of like, "I always like coming over here. It's always fun, whatever." Like, kind of like being. Kind of talking down to it a little bit. I mean, I got the impression that he was talking down to it a little bit because I think he was coming from some Russian museum, from what I gathered, right? And he's like, yeah, we're over here and we like coming over here, get a good laugh about how small this place is, kind of like that attitude or whatever. So they're talking and we go to the other, we're looking a little bit more at the museum before we leave. And then I started realizing this guy started saying like, hey, does anyone here know that he was captured imprisoned by Catherine the Great? And I'm like, is this guy like coming in here flexing about like Russia being the ones who finally captured him or something, And I got that impression from him. You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. Of like all things you could say about the guy. Oh, he didn't. How many people who came in here know that what he did at Saratoga, like off the bat?
Yeah,
it was really obscure thing.
Yeah, he came in flexing like, yeah. Oh, he got in prison. It's like, wow, that's me. And John, it was weird because John can't hear.
Battlefield.
John can't hear that well, and I've noticed, and he didn't really. He was like, it was funny because as he was saying this and I was hearing this, John says, "Do you think any Russians ever come in here and start like talking smack on him?" Like he's asking me that, and I'm like whispering, like the guy who's here right now doing it, and he's like, "What?" John's saying like, "What?" real loud. And I'm like, "Dude, let's get out of here." And then when we leave, I'm like, "You realize that's what this guy was doing?" You're like, "Oh no, I didn't hear it."
He didn't sound Russian.
No, he certainly didn't, but maybe he's a spy. It was funny. It was funny.
He could have been a Napoleon fan. He could have been a Napoleon fan. Napoleon ended up talking trash on him. I mean, everyone's got their haters,
So that was it. I mean, it was fun. It was pretty eventful. There was some cool stuff in there. Just a final thought. I just wanted to like leave. I don't know, John, if you have any more final thoughts of just the museum in general. A couple of the favorite things that I saw was the letter. He wrote some letter to, I don't know if he was a postman or I don't know who he was. He was like a postmaster general or something. And it was a letter that he hand wrote. And he was basically just talking about how he was jealous of these dudes hanging out with chicks and getting married and stuff. That's what I understood. You could barely read it. There was no actual printed text of what he was written, but I spent a good 5-10 minutes trying to like decipher this from his writing. Cause you can tell it was written in like broken English to begin with, but also like in this like fancy cursive. So I was trying to get there. And he was talking about like, oh, he's getting married. Good for him. He was always hanging out with chicks. I was always jealous. Like, I don't know. This guy just seems like he seems like a normal guy who was like heartbroken, bounced out of his country, like, and that kind of came through in that letter. I felt like, it was just weird. It was like during the American Revolution, he's talking about like him getting married and how he's happy for him, and maybe that's just what he wanted. And he never got married, right?
I don't think so. Yeah, he was heartbroken.
He was always in love with that. He was always in love with that woman that he could never have. If that's not relatable,
at one point, but we don't have to get into that. I think after, she helped him, but
and to that point, like he just seemed like a really genuine, nice guy with that, like thinking of that or whatever. And there was one other thing that I really liked, and not to be funny. It's not funny, not making fun of him. And I saw it in like we kind of talked about the Zeltners, his host family in Switzerland, and how Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter. I guess that's who ultimately notified Thomas Jefferson that was maybe he was the word that was sent over that he had died. And at one point when he was living with them, he wrote a letter to the teenage son Conrad, the teenage son of the Zeldner family, and it was kind of like a letter just like of advice to live by and stuff. And I don't know, John, if you don't mind, I'd like to read the stuff that he said, and they had like a nice flip book of like all this stuff in there.
Okay, go for it.
You want me to read it?
Sure.
It was just like a list of some things to live by. Be always frank and loyal, and always speak the truth. Shun selfishness and egotism before speaking something or answering. Reflect well and reason. Never fail to make obvious your gratitude in all circumstances to a person who takes charge of your happiness. If a secret is entrusted to you, keep it religiously. In all your actions, you must be upright, sincere, and open. No dissimulation in any of your talk. Never argue, but seek truth serenely and modestly, John. Be polite. Be polite and considerate to everyone, agreeable and obliging in society, always humane and succor to poor succor the poor according to your means. Read instructive books to embellish your mind and better your heart. There you go, John. Never degrade yourself by making bad acquaintances, but be always with persons full of morals and of good reputation. At last, your conduct must be such that everyone approves of it. That's some good advice to live by. I felt like that was nice of him to do.
Yeah. A lot of just good moral principles, just salt of the earth, humble.
He seems like so I mean, just to like summarize what this guy's life was like is like he grew up middle class.
Like someone else we know.
Grew up middle class, going to school, family couldn't afford it, he had to drop out, finally made his way into military school, graduated from that, still couldn't afford to join the actual army when his country was going to war, ended up being a tutor, fell in love with a girl, can't marry her, what do? Join the army, the American army, comes to America, helps out, he's, the engineer, everyone's poo-pooing him, saying, you don't know what you're doing. He, keeps at it, works his way up to be a respected guy, finally leaves, gets to his home country, fights for his country, loses, comes back gets arrested, released, comes back to Philadelphia, then gets basically booted out of America, which he helped freaking get their independence.
And he was a citizen, and he became
by the Alien and Sedition Acts. He got basically forced back out of there, goes back to Poland, or goes back to Europe. Poland doesn't exist anymore. Just a heartbroken guy, but still lived his life.
He still has, but he still has one more candle. He thinks, maybe there's one more last shot with Napoleon. Maybe there's one more hope.
Yeah.
And no, just not.
Never got married, even though he seemed like a nice guy. Very relatable. Salt of the earth type guy. And like from what I understand, like a lot of people said, like he wasn't very proper. He was considered like, again, like even when he would go to places, really seems like a guy who would wear a baseball hat to his friend's wedding.
Along with his Society of Cincinnati badge.
Right. I think like you would never know if he was wealthy. I feel like he was a very modest person, and that was just cool. He never, I don't think he ever really, I get the opinion that he did all this stuff in the background with Saratoga and all this stuff, but never really looked for praise or admiration. And that's probably why he never made his way into the history books in America. I think if this guy was an American, he would definitely be way more famous than he is.
If he was American?
Yeah.
And had an American sounding name, I think so.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like certain people, especially call it maybe on the left, I don't, let's get necessarily political distinction, but all the things he stood for, I think they seem pretty genuine. I don't think he had an ulterior motive to this thing. I think he just genuinely.
No, he never got anything for any of what he did.
Yeah.
Well, he never got
some
anything.
Of the serfs and fought with other peasants and like.
Yeah, but he never got paid by America for doing that. He never got his country back. He never really, he he never was really able to enjoy the fruits of his labor, as one could say, to some end. I don't know how the end of his life
but
was.
at the end of his life, maybe that's a good quick segue.
What was your favorite part of the museum?
I liked the short. There was a video on his life. I thought that was
You liked
interesting.
that? That wasn't about his life. I actually have that listed as being super lame.
Well,
It was 4 minutes, and you even said so. It was 4 minutes long, and it was only about the American Revolution.
I thought, okay,
rewind. That was
rewind.
the worst part of the museum. Honestly, didn't need to be there. Of what?
I guess maybe I like the room more than the painting. There was like full size, like 3 or 6 feet high by 6 feet by 4 feet wide paintings of him, of all of like his well-known portraits, not the one with
like
him holding his head, his bandaged head. Those were cool. There's a full-size, life-size bust of his head, like a statue of his head. I thought, seeing the room was cool. It was just kind of like a room. But no, I thought, some of his other personal effects. I thought the stamps were cool. Not his personal effects, but other things. That the stamps were cool. There was one that commemorated the 150th anniversary of him becoming an American citizen from 1933. That was neat. There was a wine decanter? No, what was it?
Whiskey decanter.
A whiskey decanter of him on a horse, like all colored, all painted and stuff. That was neat. His face was on a bunch of current money and Polish money primarily. And but I think also just talking to people that know about him too. That was cool. I think talking to the park rangers, both in Saratoga and at the museum, like they knew about him, and I'm not the only one. I had a really fun time. I'm really glad we got down there. It was on my bucket list for a while. Ever since I read the book on him. But although maybe he never found love. He never got his homeland back. I mean, certainly after the fact, he was commemorated and all over the world. And I mean, it's one of those things. If you ever go to like a Polish American hall, one of these like places you can go out and eat and stuff, or get some cultural history. I mean, his picture's probably all over the place. Him and Casimir Pulaski, another Polish American founding father. They love the guy.
It was a good day. The rest of the day, we had some time. Somebody didn't check the train schedule to know exactly what time the trains left, so we had some time to kill before we caught a train. So like, hey, what do we want to do? And I thought like, hey, why don't we go see Ben Franklin's grave? Figured we were close by. It was something quick. Thought it'd be fun to do. So it's a couple blocks walk, but like kind of in the same direction that we were going to. Ben Franklin grave. We show up there, and it turns out it's $5 to get in, which is crazy. But I made John walk all the way there, so I paid for us to get in there.
Thank you.
And there is nothing special really with that except Ben Franklin's grave just sitting there. And then I realized that there was a bunch of people standing outside taking pictures next to the grave outside for free, because the gate, the gate right next to Ben Franklin's like grave is like open. It's like a you can see inside. So people were just like posing with pictures and throwing pennies on it, which I guess maybe is a thing. I don't know. I didn't do that because we just paid $5 to get in. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you guys are cheap. Come in and take a look at it. So that kind of ticked me off a little bit. Yeah. We walked around. It was a normal graveyard for the church, Christ Church, I think is what it's called in Philadelphia, which is still a church. I actually worked in there at one point and saw the bell tower, it was really cool being in there. But the grave, the cemetery is not at the church. And you walk around and there's really no information for you. You pay $5 for basically nothing. You walk through, there's just a bunch of old gravestones. There were 2 gravestones that the people had died in like the 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. That was weird. I don't know how much it costs for you to do that, which led me to think like, hey, do you think if we were related to them, you'd still have to pay to get in to see them, or could you get in for free?
I'm sure you get like a pass or a badge. Something maybe flash and say, hey, I have relatives, like recently deceased relatives buried here somehow. And they'd be like, what?
Even if they weren't recently deceased, you should be able to go there for free. It'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, if you could prove it that they're there, I'm sure family get passes of some
there
sort.
was some pretty cool like grave sites and stuff and crypts and whatever. And I think I did give you an idea of what I wanted when I died. One of the people had something pretty cool. If I remember correctly, I was like, "Hey, that's what I want for my graveyard."
I forgot immediately after.
Wow. You have to go back.
I do know. I will say one more PSA to our fans out there. Again, common courtesy will get you a long way in this world. As Matt and I were kind of making our way out, we did walk by the gravestone of another founding father, Dr. Benjamin Rush, early doctor during the American Revolution and in the early period. I'm about to take a picture. And as I do that, believe it or not, a whole tour group comes into the cemetery, and they're being led by a tour guide.
I don't have to pay $5.
And I don't know how much they paid to get in there. I'm literally standing in front of Mr. Rush's gravestone, and the leader of the tour guide, doesn't say anything. Like, he can kind of clearly tell I'm trying to take a picture. Like, I'm here, but like obviously that's like a big thing in this cemetery. That was the next stop in his tour in this cemetery. Yeah. So it's like he's got 10 people in tow, but like I'm already in front of it. Like I got my picture, and like he just kind of like moves right in and stands right next to it and doesn't acknowledge that Matt and I are already there. Like we're trying to enjoy our couple seconds with the man.
In his defense, in this guy, like I agree, and so we got pushed out of there, and then we had to like kind of make our way through the crowd. In their defense, we were walking counterclockwise around the cemetery, and they were walking clockwise, which I think is probably more the general rule of thumb. So we were kind of going against traffic there. So I mean, I'm with you, but
it's a it's a cemetery. There's not a lot of traffic, not a lot of movement. He could have waited.
There's more traffic outside of it for the free shots of the picture than inside of it. Those
just for the sake of like, there's other weirdos that would pay $5 to come in here. Okay, I'll let them. Maybe they'll get their money's worth if they take this picture.
And what I said to John is the reason that it's $5 is to keep the riffraff out of there. I think is the
including
main
us.
reason. Yes,
probably should have raised the price a little more to keep us out.
And they were charging $1 for water on top of everything. So. They had no information. Like you pay this $5 and you get nothing for it. No map, no brochure, nothing. It's like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, points of interest. Who were like the 5 founding fathers I should stop by?
Although it does. The money goes to the church, so whatever, it's fine.
Maintaining the cemetery and all that stuff. Yeah,
it's a nice cemetery. It's small, but it's nice. I wouldn't mind getting buried there. Hint, hint.
I'll work my magic. I'll see what I can do for you.
So that's pretty much it. Then we walk. Then we tried to go to the freaking Thomas Jefferson house where we talked about it, I believe, when we went to the American Revolution, where it was the house that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, but it was actually just a rebuilt house, so it's not really authentic like the Kościuszko Museum is authentic. But we went there. John looked up on his phone that it was open from 5 a.m. until midnight or something. Some crazy hours, right?
Yeah, like Mondays. It's open. It was just a mistype in Google.
So we're trying to we're killing the time, and we get there and it's closed. And I never even looked to see what the actual hours were. But so we wound up in there. Then we're in the Independence National Park System area. We're just minding our own business, walking through. We see all the chooches waiting in line to go see the stupid Liberty Bell. I mean, the line was crazy long, and it was raining out. They were waiting in line, and there's like some construction or whatever. Not to get too detailed, so we make our way around it, and we start walking. There's these 2 guys standing against the wall in front of the building that the Liberty Bell's in, and they're like, "Hey, excuse me." We're like, "Yeah." He's like, "Where's the Liberty Bell?" And I'm like,
yeah."
When they say that, I'm like, it's right there. We were, as they asked that question, we were looking at the Liberty Bell.
Because there's glass. Like there's a glass panel that you can see into it. It's kind of fogged. It's kind of dirty and foggy, but you can still clearly see there's a bell behind that. And like he's looking at us. He's facing Independence Hall. We're looking at the Liberty Bell.
They were like standing right in front.
That was great. And then I'm like, yeah, it's there. And Matt's like, oh, you should probably want to get in line. There's a long line. And then I think he just wandered away. He's like, I'm not.
Yeah, well, because like why I say that there was construction, there was a long line. I'm like, if you want, I think I said like it's right there. But I guess if you want to go in to look at it, you have to wait in line, and to do that, you got to go like around here and whatever, like get to the other side of this construction fence. And like the guy looked at me like. He's like, what? Like, it's that way. He's like, okay. Like he couldn't comprehend. I'm like, the bell's right there.
There's even turn around and be like, where? Like, because if someone says it's right there and they point a finger, my first instinct is to crack my head 180 degrees.
And like I would have made something like, whoa, I'm such a goofball.
Oh, there it is. Oh, pretty hard to miss that. Like,
yeah, right. Like nothing. They were just like, okay.
He was like, just like, but that's tourists.
I don't know. I think we get you forget that we have some type of Philadelphia accent to these people who aren't from there. So maybe as we talk, it comes across as like really like it's right over there, you idiot.
Yeah,
you know, like I don't.
And he just sees it in the movies. He's like, these Philadelphians, they talk this way, and they're never super on point.
I mean, similar to like when we were in the Adirondacks, and you thought I was yelling at that guy looking for the code for the bathroom. Maybe that's how he felt with me. So it's a story for another day, fans.
So then, yeah, we eventually got back to Jefferson Station. Should be renamed Kościuszko Station. Jefferson Kościuszko Station, maybe.
There you go. And then, we got on the train, and then there were the thing, just to get back to the train station, what I've been trying to say to John is like, this is like the higher. For one, I realized there's the other thing on top of it being a longer train ride. What I learned as we were buying tickets is it's also in a different zone. So it's actually even more expensive to ride the train. So not only does it take longer, not only do you have to walk 15 minutes to get to the train station, and not only does it take, is it a longer train ride, but it also costs more.
And also, trifecta.
The thing that I don't like about it is you're going through like the main line, and so you get all these snooty people there. So let's like to get to the point of like it's more expensive, it's a longer train ride, you're dealing with a bunch of rich snobby chooches. Just take the train from Norristown, more down to earth. Kościuszko 100%. Kościuszko would 100% not take the paoli line. And if you want to live the way that he did, talking to Connor Zeltner, whatever. Take the Norristown line when you're going into the city. That's all I got to say.
Good advice.
Final. I really kind of want to get. I guess we kind of talked too long, and I don't want to. Maybe the next episode we can get into this. We got some fan mail, some response to our my solo episode. We got some input, but I don't want to do them the disservice of talking about it at the end of a long podcast. So maybe the next episode will open. I really hope that my nephew freaking tells his teacher, well, why are we listening about the freaking ice? Why are we learning about the Ice Age? Let's learn about this guy, Kościuszko.
Or even if they're talking a bit to the American Revolution and they want to talk about, I don't know, who's a bozo they always talk about. They were just like, that guy wasn't
Benedict Arnold.
Important. Well, he was good for a while until he wasn't. He sold Kościuszko's secrets. He's the one, he sold the secrets to West Point, sold the plans to West Point, to the British.
Well, he was in charge of West Point.
Basically sold Kościuszko up the river, literally.
All right, fans. Well, I think that's all that we have for you. I hope you enjoyed the talk of finally we got to the museum, and I hope maybe you learned a little bit about the man who I still will say final thoughts. I think I said this to John. I don't think he would be in the framework of what we said of founding fathers and how everything else was going on. I think he had played a huge role in the United States gaining independence, which is an admirable thing, and he was a pretty cool guy. But as far as a high rank of a founding father, he kind of left when the country started getting formed. So I don't see it.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
We'll see on the next one. As always, shoot us a text. Let us know your thoughts on Kościuszko.
Get in there before you got a couple more weeks before they close for the season. You'll be getting this week, so you'll probably have about 10 days or so. Oh, I guess 2 days within that 10 days to get there. Check them out. Make a whole day of it in Philly.
Send it to text. Hit us up on Twitter at Nailing History, or send us an email at nailinghistorypod@gmail.com. Got anything else to add, John?
No, I just want to say, guys, I'm really excited to have been back after being on hiatus. Matt, I want to thank you again for steering the ship solo last week. I'm really excited to be back on it and looking forward to doing more episodes and growing the base.
All right. Got anything else to leave them with?
Stay curious.
And we say bye-bye.